I just had a session with somebody who was, she was telling me about how every time when she gets to some place, she's unlucky because the people there are hard to work with and all that, right? So I told her that classic story from the old West when a family is moving west to find new opportunities and they get to a new village, and as usual the village is right on a river, so they need to be like ferried over. And at the time there was always a ferryman using it with ropes and stuff, so they pack all their gear on and they say, you know, he asks, well, so where are you going? Well, we're thinking about coming to this town because we didn't have opportunities where we were from, so how are they in this town? And the ferryman says, well, it kind of depends. Depends on what? How were they where you're coming from? And I said, well, they were all thinking about themselves. They didn't give us a break. That's why we're trying this new stuff. And he said, sadly, I have to report that they're pretty much the same here. And then the day after, a new family is ferrying through, and they ask him too, like, could you give us a heads up? What's this village like? We might like it. And he says, well, it depends. It depends on what? How were they where you were? Well, they were really nice and they were trying their best to, but my husband is a smith, and we already had two smiths in the village, so there wasn't room for us to have that opportunity. So now we're moving. I said, well, you're going to find them very accommodating here too. So
how did she react?
And she went like, oh, and she really got it. And I said, because you have to see the common denominator here, you know.
What we found maybe one of our biggest advantages getting into sports and football was that we had absolutely zero, like we had no idea. We've never been in that world. We had none of that.
Yeah.
And, you know, before when we would ask, people would say like, well, good luck with that because, you know, it's already closed and blah, 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 and, you know, all these stories.
Yeah.
But thankfully we just didn't, buy them. And as you go fresh, you realize like, oh, well, interesting. They kind of like seem like people, just like in the other industry, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the biggest things that anybody can do for anything coming in fresh.
Yes.
And it goes for a relationship as well.
Because at the end of the day, when you're like, oh, you see your thoughts, you feel your thoughts, that is the potential for freshness is like always there, 1 second to the other. And and yet I think if you stop 10 people down the street randomly, at least 9 would tell you sort of like tell you stories about how it all is the same and my work and it's always there and I'm doing the same thing for 7 years and my part. Like we have all this gift of potentially living in a brand new world every second of our life and seeing it for the first time. And not knowing it, we get stuck into the same word for life.
Habitual thinking. I think one thing that most people might miss as well when you get into this is that means that it goes exactly the same quickness the other way.
Yeah.
So I think everybody has had in a relationship, for example, that experience where you wake up, you look over and you're like, wow, I haven't made that many great decisions in my life, but that's one of them. That's the light of my life, one of the best decisions. And then 10 minutes later, you're like, oh my God, why the hell are we together? And unless you understand what we're talking about now, how fast the thought clouds shift, you will think that you found out something about your partner that they should have said before you got married or got together. Because you think, now I kind of scratched out the truth of them, instead of realizing that, nah, that's just the natural shift of my thinking and my thought clouds. And when it's cloudy, they look like they're crap. And when it's sunshiny, they look wonderful to me.
You know, like what's in this respect, when you start seeing like that, both, oh my God, this is the best choice I've made in my life, and who's this person, and how did I end up here? What was I thinking? You know?
Yeah.
It's when you see that they're both imaginary, that your opinion about something or someone is just made up, regardless if it's a good opinion or a bad opinion.
Yeah.
you lose interest in your opinions, in what looks real right now. And initially, the way I talk about it, and it was like I had this conversation very like yesterday with a football head coach that we work with, and we were talking about this, and I said, listen, for me, this piece by itself is terrible news, potentially, because you're saying, dude, it doesn't matter what you see and experience, it's made up. Like you can't trust any of that, right? Like you think this is a really good idea, whatever. You think this is a really bad idea, whatever. You know, it's like it's complete. The reality you experience is made of your thoughts, and your thoughts keep changing, and so does your reality. None of that is real, you know.
Yeah.
But for me, and I love the metaphor of the shifting dunes of sand in certain desert. It's really like, just so you know, you're trying to navigate this desert, keeping that dune always on your right. But just so you know, when you go to sleep, that moves. So
Yeah.
just you're gonna get lost inevitably. Like, oh, that's terrible news. But then there's the second bit, which is, oh, and checking your pocket. What? Oh, you have a compass, right? There's something that I see that's deeper than our, oh, this is very important, or this is not important, or this is good. There's something deeper. It's sort of like, and I love to, in a conversation, for example, in a relationship, someone tells me like, well, there's this thing I don't like about that man. This is this thing. And then, so, okay, we settle a little bit. And I say, hey, right, but just right now, are what's coming from you is you want to leave her. Oh, no, absolutely. That's it. See, like, regardless of what you think, that can shift. You just know. And man, by all means, it could be, hey, you know what? Yeah, I think we had a beautiful time in the time history. Like, also don't think that necessarily means that you always have to be together with the person because we are all connected.
No.
Like, there's something guiding you, but that's all that matters, because my story and my opinion and my expectation about anything is irrelevant. And when we see that, now it's really good news. It's like, oh, you're not trapped in whatever you're creating, and you can just trust the deeper part of yourself guiding you. And then, then it's very easy.
And actually knowing that sometimes you're gonna be listening together horrible music, but still being so sure inside that you want to be there. It's probably one of the most romantic things that you can have in a relationship. Once you see it this way, once you have it clear. Well, sometimes we're gonna be playing a song or an album that sucks, really sucks. We hate it. It's just it's there. Let's stay together and listen to it.
Yeah, that's the most beautiful thing, I think, is that I'm here because I want to be, not because I have to be.
Yeah.
Or I'm here because I have nowhere else to go. Right? It's that choosing of being here.
It's really two different levels. The feelings, the thoughts, the opinions we have about a relationship right now, or anything, my job, and the flute, which sometimes is just a check. Do I want to be here? Yes. Okay. The rest doesn't matter. Do I want to be here? No. Oh, okay. And then that's why then, as you were saying, there is an organic development, because it's made of obvious decisions. Yes or no. Yes.
I think culturally we have been taught to be suspicious of obvious, of simple, because we do, like, all of this that we're saying, I thought of conversation of people wanting to leave their job because, like, yeah, this is too much, and he's an asshole, and blah blah blah. And anyway, because it had all this story, and they kept going. Say, all right, and again, we settled. It was a sport director, and I said, okay, well, look, just to check, would you write your resignation letter now as we close the? Oh, no, absolutely not, and definitely not for at least a year. Oh, that's it.
And the idea is that if I'm hard enough on myself, I will finally get it and not repeat the mistake. And it's the other way around, that the softer we are, the faster we learn. And we know that when we have small kids, because when they're starting to learn to walk, if they stand up and try to take their first steps and they fall on their face, but usually on their bottom because they're smart enough, the bottoms are not as breakable as faces. But anyway, I don't think any parent will go up there and say like, what the hell, that's 3 tries, you're never going to walk, you're stupid, and think that that would be a good thing. What we would do is pick them up and say, that was closer. You half a step. Yes, that was better. Yes. And we're very encouraging up until about the age of 2 or 3. And then for some reason, all parents have a switch in their head where it's almost like, how many times do I have to tell you not to put the glass of milk close to the edge of the counter? Now you have to clean it up. What, are you stupid?
You know what I think, like as I was listening to you, is that the difference is we know, we have zero doubt that the baby is capable of walking. At a certain point, we're so conditioned to believing that as people, we're basically, useless unless we work on ourselves and we change it and we build it. That then as parents, we're like, well, I'm gonna, let's start. Like let's start building it. Like I have no doubt my baby will, he's 10 months, 11 months old. Nobody would have a doubt that eventually he's gonna walk. So I'm just gonna encourage you towards something I know is inevitable. And therefore that gives me that I'm the first not thinking is, you see, a parent doesn't think it's their job to have their kid walking. It's like, no, it will. It will. I can accompany him, but it will.
Yeah.
I've known that. Then we think everything else about being a good human being, making smart choices, being polite, whatever, learning stuff. We don't actually think that. We think like, no, unless I push hard, unless I give like strict rules, unless I do all these things, my kid might never fulfill their potential. So I think if we could see that fulfilling our potential is as inevitable as walking, if we are given the space and the kindness and the environment to do so, then possibly we would change the way we parent or we school or we teach them.
The life force of all human beings is pure white light. But then it hits kind of the prism of our mind and it gets distorted into the rainbow. and we talk about all these different feelings and all these different things, but it's the same white light. And in that white light, all the colors reside. It's beautiful when you see that potential in every human being and in kids.
This is common, I think, from talking with head coaches of football, because they have a team, right? So they have a bunch of different lights.
Yeah.
And I think often they think the job is, how do I make them all blue? Like, I don't get. And recently, like the conversation I was having yesterday, that was one of the things, like, okay, yeah, Nico, I get it. This is awesome. But like, so how do I, deal with a team, especially if you have maybe the one that is lazy and the one that is, how do I talk to one of my players? And what we spoke about is that, well, I really think is a big difference is going to be who you think you're talking to, right? Like, because if the question is like, how do I talk with this really lazy player? You're just already you're off in the wrong direction, right? But if you can see the white light, and you speak to that, that's going to be incredibly different. I think it sort of circles back to what we were saying in the beginning about the fresh eyes. I think the best practical advice I give to any head coach thinking about how do I communicate with my team, I think the very first thing is, well, go meet them for the first time. That's the first thing. They just today, after 5 years that you're with them, you show up to the locker room, go meet them for the first time. That's the first thing, because that's one of the things that really facilitates seeing the light, is when we show up
Yeah.
clean, and I think that's powerful. And seeing, as you were saying, that the goal is not to have a one color team,
No.
to see and make everyone aware that we are all the same white light, and then actually taking advantage of the different temperatures.
Yes. Exactly.
We were talking about time with Nico, and the fact that in ancient Greece they actually had 4 kinds of times, but the main ones are 2. It's Chronos, so linear time, the thing,
Yeah.
and the other one is Kairos, which is a meaningful amount of time. It's a qualitative measure of time.
Yeah.
And first of all, it's super cool to see it this way. It's better than linear time. And secondly, you start the meaningful stuff converges around Kairos.
And maybe all of a sudden you have 15 minutes of that Kairos time that is like, you can't even qualitatively say anything, because it could be infinity and it could be infinitely short. Time stops making sense when you're in that place.
The linear one,
it's
yeah.
like being, it's like being with somebody you love. And when you, or it doesn't matter if it's romantically love or if one of your best friends, you sit around laughing, you're gonna, all of a sudden you come out of it, as you said, and you look at your watch and say, what, 3 p.m? How the hell?
Yeah.
You're dangerous. I'm supposed to work tomorrow. And we blame it on that instead of seeing that, no, there's a timeless place inside of all of us. And we touch that, and we dip our finger into it, our mental finger into it, we have all the answers. And there's nobody smarter than you on that level. There might be people with an higher IQ, but there's nobody wiser than you. There's nobody who knows you better than you. And when you touch that place and you do it together with somebody else, you realize we're the same light.